Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a Gonzo knife. Now I haven't gotten a Gonzo knife in a long time, and that's because Gonzos are usually copies, and I decided a little while ago, in fact quite a while ago, that I wasn't going to be reviewing copies. Now, these knives seem, as far as I can tell, to be an original design, and there are a couple of other Gonzo models. I'll throw them out here really quickly right now. This one, as well as this other one. Hold on. I guess I should give you the numbers on this. This is the 760, and the one I just showed you, it's labeled as a Firebird knife. The one I just showed you was a Ganzo F761. You can probably see that right there. I'll bring these back in when we get to the comparison portion of the video in a second here, but for now, we're going to focus on the 749. And so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this guy. By the way, there are links in the description box below, and if you use those links, it does help the channel. You're ordering from GearBest, and I will touch base with GearBest and see if there's any kind of discount code. Sometimes there are. If there are, then I'll indicate that in the description box below as well. Now, let me say this before we get going too much further. These are the only Gonzos that I'm aware of that are not copying anything else, that are their own original designs. And so I feel fairly comfortable sharing these with you. I'm not going to be reviewing any others unless they fit into the same category as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this particular review now that I've given you a bunch of qualifiers and shown you a couple of other knives. So this is the knife we're actually looking at. It's a pretty decent looking knife. Bolster lock, G10 scales, 440C clip point blade. Honestly, I actually kind of like this knife, and it's reasonably well done. Now we'll talk about that in a second because there are some differences between these two knives indicating that maybe there's a bit of a challenge in terms of quality control. And so that's something that you're going to have to be aware of. And that's fairly long standing with Gonzo. I've talked about this before. I've had, you buy 3 knives, all the same model. Two will have perfect centering, one won't. 2 will have no blade play, one will have blade play. It's just kind of par for the course when you're ordering from Gonzo. So normally I recommend people order 2. So let's talk about, first off, size and weight on this guy. The overall length here is 8 3/16 inches. The blade length is 3.5. The handle length is 4 11/16. This guy is 7/16 thick and 5.1 ounces, which is a little hefty for a knife of this size, but not the end of the world. Let's talk about the blade a little bit, because the blade is one of the things that Gonzo does pretty well, especially for the price point. So you've got this high flat grind in satin finish in 440C clip point blade, some nice belly there, reasonably thin behind the edge, pretty useful cutting tool. And here's the thing that I want to say about Gonzo, and I can say this about the other 2 knives I've got here as well. The blades tend to be pretty functional, reasonably thin behind the edge, and the performance on the 440C is pretty darn good. In fact, here's what drives me a little bit crazy here, and that is that with the Gonzo knives, you're going to get better performing blade steel than you will with virtually any of the discount Kershaws or CRKTs. And that makes me a little bit nuts. Okay. These Gonzo knives are really budget friendly, like $15 to $20. And when you're spending double that for a CRKT or a Kershaw, it feels like you should get a little more performance out of it, but very often you won't. And so that's pretty frustrating to me. And I guess maybe helpful when it comes to looking at these knives, yeah, you're going to get better performance out of this than pretty much any budget CRKT, any budget Kershaw, because the blade steel is definitely better. And that's pretty nice for the price point. Now, let me go on though, because we're not quite done. We need to talk about lockup and deployment. All right. And so with this knife, the lockup is really nice. The one issue I do have with it is it doesn't, if you have your finger here and when the flipper tab hits your finger, you haven't quite passed the detent ball yet. So the knife is right now, hold on, there you go. So the blade tang is pushing right now against the detent ball. And that is really annoying. If you're trying to flick this knife, it gets really uncomfortable really quickly. Otherwise, though, the action on this is really nice. Whoops. Wow. It flips well. If I could demonstrate that on camera, I really have not had a problem flipping this until just now. The thumb stud deployment works well also. This is on bearings, and it's reasonably well done bearings. You know, these are not the kind of bearing pivots you're going to get in a ZT or a Wii knife or something like that, but they're pretty darn good. Now, let me talk about this one, and this is where you're going to have a bit of an issue. Notice, first of all, the lockup is nearly 100%, which sucks. Okay, and there are two reasons that sucks. Number one, you're not going to get as much wear on this knife. Now, that part I don't really care about. Honestly, for the price you're paying, if this lasts for 2 or 3 years before that lockup starts to be a problem, like you only paid 20 bucks for it, you can buy another one. Where it becomes a problem is now, because that lock bar is so far over here close to this scale, it actually becomes really tough to actuate. And one-handed, there we go. You see, I can do it, but not very well. The other issue with this one, the silver one, is that while I can deploy it, it's very easy to fail. The pivot is just not smooth. Now, I haven't taken this apart, and I probably could take it apart, clean up the pivot, and get better performance out of it, but I purposely didn't want to do that until this video is over. So I will take it apart, clean it up, and see what happens. And if it's greatly improved, I'll make a follow-up video sharing that. But I wanted to share, first of all, that out of box, this has really, really poor action, despite the fact that it has a bearing pivot. All right, both of them work pretty well when deployed via thumb stud, but this one is not very smooth at all. This one is pretty good. And that's one of the challenges, is that, you know, when you're getting a Gonzo knife, you can't always count on the consistency. And that's why I said, you know, when in the past, when I was buying these, I would almost always buy 2 of every one that I bought, because chances were pretty good that one of them wasn't going to be ideal. And so that's a fairly good practice to have. The other thing is, these all did ship from China and got through without any issues. It was slow, but they weren't stopped or inspected or anything by CBSA. And so that's probably worth noticing. By the way, you know, these knives I wouldn't be that concerned about, because let's be honest, if you spent, what would be here, 20, 40, 60, so 80 bucks if you bought all 4, normally you'd be buying 2. So, you know, you'd be spending between $30 and $40. And if the government takes that, if CBSA confiscates it, you know, I'm not going to die. It wouldn't be the most exciting thing in the world, but, you know, I'm probably going to survive the ordeal. If they take something more expensive, yeah, that's going to be a little more impactful. So I just wanted to have that little conversation in there. So notice that about the action. You know, this one really sucks. This one is quite good. And that's kind of par for the course in my experience from Gonzo. Now, I will say that these other 2 knives, both of them are very, very solid. However, I will add that other Gonzos I've had with the, whatever they call their version of the Axis lock, the G lock or something like that, I have had these, right now they're solid as a rock, but I have had them develop a little bit of blade play over time. And when they do, there's not really much you can do about it. I had one I gave away in a giveaway, and it developed some blade play. And, you know, I had to tell the guy, like, look, I don't know, you can try to go through Gonzo, but the chances of them having a great warranty program is very little. All right, so essentially, you know, when you get one that has a bit of blade play in it, just throw it away. Or, I mean, use it with blade play, and when it gets too bad that you can't take it anymore, then throw it away, because it was only, what, $15 or something. All right, so let's go on and talk a little bit about the handle, because the handle on this I actually really, really like. They've done a couple of good things. Number one, it's comfortable, it's grippy. The one thing I don't like is, you know, this is not a work of art. So they made this clip to be tip up or tip down carry, but only right side. And I'm thinking, you know, if you're doing this anyway, and they've done some other milling, they've actually, let's see if I can show you there. Maybe you can see it. If I get the angle right, hold on. Should be able to see it there, that they have actually milled these out internally, which is definitely a nice touch and is going to lighten things up a little bit. So I like that. But my point I was making here is they've done the extra milling anyway. Why wouldn't you put a spot for a clip on the other side and make it 4-way so that lefties could be a little happier with it as well? They didn't choose to do that, so that's kind of a kind of a miss. On the other hand, I do like the fact that they've milled this out to make it so that the clip sits flush. All right, so that's pretty nice. And the clip does go in and out of pocket pretty nicely. In terms of, you know, overall fit and finish, the transition here between the G10 and the steel is not bad, especially for a knife of this price point. So not a whole lot to complain about in terms of construction or in terms of ergonomics. Let's go ahead and grab some comparisons now. So I'm going to set this one aside since it sucks to, you know, I really have to work hard to make sure it opens every time on camera. And then, you know, unlocking it is kind of a pain in the neck as well. So just keep in mind that that one with the crappy action does exist. And let's pull in some comparisons here. So of course, a Rat Model 1, this is the D2 version. The one area where the Gonzo may excel is the blade steel. The 440C on Gonzos is probably, well, not probably, but it's demonstrably better than the AUS 8 that's used by Ontario. And I think there's a whole video where Frankie and Bird do a long cut test comparing those two. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cedric and Ada Gear and Outdoors had done something similar. Rat Model 1 is probably going to be, I don't know, you know, I've had really, really good long-term performance from these. I haven't had the same experience with Gonzo. Now, of course, there is a difference in price, so that's something to be considered. Here's a Kershaw Knockout. Again, a great knife, definitely in a different price point than this, but this is a fairly common knife, and I thought it might help as a size comparison. Spyderco Manix 2 Lockback, again, a fairly well-known knife, primarily here for size comparison. Let's go ahead and pull a CRKT out, since I picked on CRKT a little bit in the video. This is the CRKT Caligo. Really, really nice design. I actually love this design. But again, you're dealing with inferior steel, although I like the design better, and I certainly like the handle construction better. Finally, let's throw in the other two Gonzos that I have here. By the way, as I said, I will have GearBest links to all of these in the description box. All right, and these have actually been pretty good. The fit and finish, the blade play, all of those things I'm pretty happy with on these two. I'm not sure yet whether I'll do a full review on them or just leave this video as sort of my single video covering all of these. The one thing I do want to bring in here is the real steel. So this is the G3 Puko, really nice knife. And I want to make the point here that yes, if you step up to a rake knife or a real steel, you are definitely going to get better quality control. You're going to get, you know, what is, in my opinion, a better steel in the 14C28N, and you're going to get some nicer designs and, of course, original designs, which is definitely important as far as I'm concerned. Real steel is doing a great job, and the action on this is so amazing. Honestly, really impressive. There's some comparisons for you. What's my overall take on this knife? You know, this is a great beater knife. This is a great budget knife. You know, Gonzo has always stood out to me among the really budget-friendly Chinese-made knives, you know, out of the Enlins and Senran Muse and, you know, B, and there's a couple of others, Chinese companies. Gonzo, you know, in terms of fit and finish, in terms of quality, reliability, they have been the ones that I've found to be the best. All right, some of you may have different experiences, but overall they seem to do pretty well. And the fact that they're doing some of their own designs now, I think is a real win. And certainly that's almost one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video, is just simply talk about the fact that they have done their own work here, which is really, really nice to see. There you go, guys. Any questions, comments? I'd love to hear that down below. What your thoughts are on Gonzo and experiences that you've had. And you know, tell me if I'm you know, justified in my suggestion that if you're going to buy one, you should probably buy two of the same model, just to make sure that you're going to be happy that one is going to function well for you. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.